Our economy is largely informal, so we believe that the microfinance institutions obviously have got a much deeper reach, so there's age loan and get backs. In terms of the purpose of the loan facility that has been put in place, it's basically to look at school fees as well as student accommodation. In terms of eligibility, I think all students that attending universities, polytechnics, teachers' colleges, and technical colleges are all eligible to actually apply for the student loan facility. I'll briefly talk about the term sheet. In terms of the interest rate, if you can go to the next slide. In terms of the interest rate that's accruing there, the interest rate is 10% per annum, which is fairly competitive given the fact that I think the interest rates that are actually obtaining on the market are around 12%. The tenure is flexible, it's up to about 5 years. In terms of the security, the expectation is that the guardian or the parent is supposed to provide a guarantee. So the principal borrower is basically the parent or the guardian. There's also credit insurance that actually comes with that. I'll briefly talk about the issue of security because I know it's a very contentious issue with students as well as with varsities. Just to get people to understand why is it that the banks are actually insisting on security. I think from my previous slide, I think I've talked about the need for us to actually come up with a sustainable funding model. The previous funding models were not too sustainable because generally people were actually not repaying. So I think under the current model, we actually insist that the guarantor is actually supposed to be, the borrower is supposed to be the guardian, who is supposed to guarantee repayment. So the reason why you actually want security is actually to ensure that there's commitment from the parent or the guardian. We also want the fund to also be sustainable in the sense that we want future generations to continue drawing down on the fund. Previously, I think we've had a lot of people that have benefited from the fund, but they've not repaid, much to the disadvantage of the present generation. And again, like I indicated earlier on, we are partially getting funding from government, and part of the money is also coming from the banking sector. And the money that's sitting with banks is basically depositors' money. So we also want to ensure that there's stability in the sector. So we want to create a facility that people can actually repay. I'll briefly talk about the application process. The guardian is the one that's supposed to be doing the borrowing. So they actually complete their application forms. Credit assessment is actually done by the bank. And to manage the risk of abuse of the funding, what we do as the banking industry, we actually disperse the funds direct into the university account. So we actually ensure that the loans that we actually give out, they actually don't end up being abused. In terms of government support, the RBZ is basically matching $1 for $1. So for every dollar of loan that's created or that's given out as a loan, the RBZ is actually giving us another $1. So the funding is almost like on a 50-50 basis. But in terms of the credit risk, the banks basically retain the credit risk. My last slide, I'll talk about the advantage of the student loan facility. It's basically accessible to all students at all tertiary institutions. We are not discriminatory. It is a partnership between government and the banking sector. Like I indicated earlier on, the RBZ is basically matching $1 for $1 for every loan that is actually dispersed. We believe that the current funding model is also very sustainable in the sense that there is actually security that's provided by either the parent or the guardian. And there's also flexibility of the tenure. We are looking at a tenure of up to about 5 years. So depending on the repayment capacity of the guardian, we can actually go up to about 5 years. And we also believe that the interest rate that's actually being charged on that facility is also very competitive. We're talking about 10% against other market rates, which are around 12%. So that's basically the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now have colleagues coming to tell us about infrastructural requirements, starting with Vice Chancellor Kuipa.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe and Chancellor of State Universities, Comrade E.D. Mnangagwa, all protocol observed. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to speak on behalf of investors. Our sector, ladies and gentlemen, is an enrollment of about 120,000 students and employs about 20,000 staff members. Each university, as already has been pointed out by others, has enough land, and in the majority of cases, we have inadequate teaching and learning facilities, inadequate guest houses to accommodate our visiting staff members, inadequate hostel accommodation for students, inadequate equipment, books, journals, which are commensurate with the size of our institutions, and inadequate broadband connectivity. We are also constrained by the relative high cost of capital, and also the primary sources of funding for our infrastructure are cash surpluses, capital grants, as well as, to a lesser extent, capital market transactions, as was pointed out by CBZ representative. Universities are also committed, ladies and gentlemen, to significant enhancement of infrastructure, essential for world-class research and all-round development of students. Infrastructure in this presentation means land, buildings, roads, IT equipment and services, scientific equipment, technical and administrative human capital supporting research, and research support facilities in their entirety. Also, just to indicate that the average electricity costs for a typical institution is about $10,000 a month, and that we see opportunity in photovoltaic power supplies at our universities. So this is an opportunity for you investors. Universities require partnerships to develop infrastructure for their core university functions. By core university functions, I mean buildings and space for teaching and learning, research, administrative and support activities, including teaching hospitals and experimental agricultural plots. We also require partnerships to develop infrastructure for commercial and trading operations. By this, we mean dedicated buildings and spaces, housing operations that can be run on a commercial basis, including student residential accommodation, possibly staff residential accommodation, food, beverage, and hospitality operations, venues for professional and other short-course trainings, leased retail and other service spaces, such as fuel stations, parking structures, space leased to external research organizations and other academic-related entities. There's also, ladies and gentlemen, a need to focus our university infrastructure investment on improving the quality and functionality of infrastructure rather than simply expanding floor space to accommodate more students. One of the points of engagement for investors with the capital markets is likely to be the debt capital markets, usually called in that field DCM, that provide borrowings in the form of bank debt and bonds, as has already been expounded by speakers before me. Investors in Zimbabwe are more likely to use joint ventures and PPPs for commercial project transactions, where the higher cost of capital can be serviced and risks are transferred to a special purpose vehicle. Traditional project finance may have limited application. We have already heard from CBZ. For our institutions, because of the relatively high cost of capital thresholds, likely infrastructure applications for project finance are ancillary services, notably student accommodation and commercial transactions with high returns. Then I will speak about research infrastructure. By research infrastructure, I mean research facilities, equipment, materials, and services that enable research and development at various stages of innovation while supporting organized research research training and teaching, and developing research and innovation capacity. For excellent research to occur, we require excellent research infrastructure, and also to note that research activity at our universities is a major space driver. The universities need leading-edge research infrastructure in order to renew the country's industrial base and innovation activities and enable the provision of services by state research institutes. Then I'll come to social amenities and services. Social amenities and services are paramount in the life of both students and staff, for they contribute to a robust working and learning environment. Most universities do not have any social facilities to talk about, and we need to arrest this trend. There's also a need for shopping facilities, student union buildings, clinics, for both our students and staff, chapels, and sporting facilities. In conclusion, universities are most likely to use project finance for operating infrastructure, such as student accommodation and commercial project transactions, where the higher cost of capital can be serviced. The ability to generate sound operating surpluses lies at the heart of the university's capacity to make the infrastructure investments necessary to support high-quality teaching, learning, and research. Funding shocks that increase risk and erode universities' operating results and balance sheets will also reduce self-financing capacity. Universities are therefore appealing to government to ensure that policy settings and the national regulatory environment for the higher education sector are developed and implemented in a manner that allows universities adequate time to respond in order to avoid funding shocks and to maintain our financial stability. Universities want to equip their laboratories and workshops with the latest technologies in order to give a real and practical technical training to our students, as well as provide research and development capacity building for the students. Universities are therefore looking for business partners who can offer several soft financing possibilities and several finance and grants options for infrastructure development. The projected overall cost for critical infrastructure, as was projected by Mr. Dowa just now, is about $1.7 billion. I thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
May I now call upon Dr. Dube to come and speak about colleges and other institutions.
Thank you, MC. Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe and Chancellor of all state universities.
I think you have to bend a little towards it.
Comrade E.D. Mnangagwa, all protocol observed. Your Excellency, I am here to make a presentation on behalf of my colleagues in tertiary institutions. The information I'm going to present is a summary of submissions by our different tertiary institutions. In tertiary institutions, we recognize the issue of STEM, and we are saying science laboratories and engineering workshops are quite critical, and it is our wish that these are availed. In order to enhance and expand the teaching of STEM subjects, there is need for modernized laboratories and engineering workshops. That is showing the labs which we would want, the modern engineering workshop which we would wish to have. This is in view of the increase in students' enrollments that we require more lecture rooms, lecture theaters, and staff offices. Of late, we want to thank the government of Zimbabwe for having heeded our plea to increase staff, though still inadequate, but there has been a slight increase, and that in turn has made a demand on more staff accommodation for offices in particular. I was talking about lecture rooms. That is showing one of the wish of a modern EMT block, that is Educational Media and Technology block. That is our wish to have such a multi-purpose hall which has the interactive boards to enable us to easily deliver our lectures. In the same vein, we want to move further, Your Excellency, if we could be assisted to have a situation where a lecturer can deliver her or his lecture from one room, but addressing the entire student population of that class. Our next request and wish is to upgrade sporting facilities. These are necessary for different gatherings that take place in our institutions in line with what is obtaining in other countries. While we are talking of sporting facilities, this time I'll sort of personalize, because we are, as teachers' colleges, we are associated to the mother university, although I know people will complain. They've said students shouldn't be rushing back to the hostels to change after a grueling sport activity near the facility or the sports pavilion, which we also are too eager to have constructed for us. We should have changing rooms which are of the state of the art, like what we can see there. In the same vein, for health reasons, the current trend says it is not quite in order to share bathing facilities like bathtubs. And for the old institutions, our wish would be to renovate, to come up with cubicles as shown in that slide. Then I was already talking of sporting facilities. That's just the one which we are showing there, the basketball pitch, which is modern, and we are saying this would be our wish in all the institutions to have the up-to-date modern facilities which will compete anywhere in the world. Is our wish. In some of our institutions, there is an acute shortage of students and staff accommodation. In all our institutions, there are staff members who are required to be on duty very early as 4:30 in the morning, and very late as around 20 2,200 hours, which is about 10. And these include kitchen staff, security personnel, and library staff. They have no choice. We have the students who would want to use the library until late, but we find that these people still have to walk long distances, and in some institutions, we have had some of our members being mugged when they are coming to work during those very early hours. It is our wish that such buildings be put up. While we do so, we would want to consider taking advantage of having high-rise structures in order to use the available land more economically. Most of the libraries, particularly those constructed before independence, were meant to accommodate small numbers than what is there now. Therefore, we would require more modern, more spacious libraries to accommodate the current populations. That will be just one such an example, but maybe something better would do for us in tertiary education. ECD and science, I can see the MC is looking at me very anxiously. I'm about to finish, don't worry, sir. ECD and science subject areas are highly specialized disciplines that would need standalone knowledge production and dissemination centers. That could be one, but something better would do. Some of our institutions do not have clinics, a situation that compromises the provision of health services. And if we had a chance to get those constructed, particularly in those institutions which do not have, we would also want to have the appropriate furniture, the appropriate beds. What we see there is not a cheap bed. They range from 2,500 to 5,000, which we cannot afford, and we hope our wish list has not scared the investors, but will encourage them to participate. I thank you.
We are now going to have somebody who is representing our future, which we are talking about, which we are developing, and this infrastructure development is aimed at them. Mr. T. Gambiza, representing our students.
Thank you, the MC. His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, and the Chancellor of all state universities, Comrade Emerson Dambudzo Mnangagwa. All protocols observed. Having said that, Your Excellency, allow me to acknowledge the presence of our student leadership, the national leadership, and also all student representative council executive members here present and other student leaders. Your Excellency, I'm tremendously delighted for the rare privilege to address this, the first ever investment conference for the higher and tertiary education sector. I am further humbled by the exceptional opportunity given to us as students to articulate our issues in the presence of His Excellency, the President himself, Comrade E.D. Mnangagwa. I am well aware that I speak on behalf of all students and young people in general when I argue that investment in education is an investment in youth programs for inclusive education and the attainment of economic benefits for people aged between 20 and 24 and 25 to 35 age groups. Therefore, investment in higher and tertiary education is an undoubted national imperative for guaranteed socio-economic transformation of our beloved nation, Zimbabwe. Notwithstanding the transient financial and economic challenges besetting our beloved country, as students, we are nonetheless grateful to the government of Zimbabwe for recognizing the immense benefits accruing from this investment. Indeed, investing in the youth is investing in posterity. Educated youth provide a critical mass of human capital with the proficiencies and competencies to unlock the immense social, scientific, technological, and economic values that this country is so vastly endowed with. Without any further ado, allow me, Your Excellency, on behalf of the students' community, to articulate the issues that resonate with the thrust of today's investment conference. The first issue or cluster that we are going to deal with, is the issue of payment of fees. As students, Your Excellency, we have always objected to the payment of full tuition fees and levies during attachment and teaching practices. We are very much aware and lively to the fact that institutions have indicated that the money is used to cover costs for student follow-ups and assessment during industrial attachment. For instance, there is need to cover fuel and travel substance allowances for lecturers, and that a lot of resources are required for students on attachment. But however, we feel that if a rational, evidence-based analysis is made, the fees can be reviewed downwards. We are also alive to the fact that this has already begun, and we appreciate. In teachers' colleges, Your Excellency, repeat students are also paying full fees, and we feel that this practice is unfair as students will not be on campus. We also believe that amenity fees by students on teaching practice should be reviewed. We urge the government to revert to the teaching practice allowance of $320 and abandon the new $157, which is a far cry from the students' requirements for stationery, food, and health care. Similarly, university students pursuing education should equally be paid allowances like their counterparts in teachers' colleges. We, however, Your Excellency, appreciate the current education loan facilities which were introduced in response to the absence of sustainable grant and loan or cadetship schemes. The facilities which operate on a pay-as-you-learn characterized by low interest rates are equally important. However, we feel that a lot more should be done to ameliorate the plight of the indigent students whose parents or guardians cannot offer the requisite guarantees to support loan applications. We also have an issue, Your Excellency, of some students' fees which are being paid through social dimension and war veteran funds. But sadly, these in many instances have not been disbursed timely, and this should be addressed moving forward, Your Excellency. On another note, Your Excellency, there is the issue of funding for allowances on students who are on attachment through the ZIMDEF coffers. Polytechnic students are grateful to the government for the ZIMDEF allowance, from the ZIMDEF attachment allowance, but we feel that these have become too low and should also be increased. Similarly, university students going on attachment do not receive any form of allowance, and we are encouraged to hear that the ministry is tirelessly working to provide allowances to all students using these ZIMDEF funds. Your Excellency, we also feel that government should also avail money for the completion of infrastructure such as hostels, lecture rooms, and lecture theaters in some or in most polytechnic colleges. As students, we are grateful to government for increasing access to higher and tertiary education to all the provinces of Zimbabwe through the policy which advocates for the establishment of at least one state university, one teachers college, and one polytechnic per each province. However, Your Excellency, these gains are currently being eroded by a shortage of hostel accommodation and most institutions, leading to the deplorable spectra of non-resident students. The scenario is detrimental to the welfare of the students and in particular to the female students. We note that the infrastructure challenge also exacerbates the plight of differentially abled students. Such students, Your Excellency, face difficulties in accessing some facilities which need ramps, pictorial or visual labels, and rails. We therefore implore the government to provide special facilities to the physically challenged students, Your Excellency. Another point to note, Your Excellency, is the fact that there is shortage of sporting facilities at some institutions, such as industrial training colleges. Needless to say, with the increasing enrollments in all our institutions, we feel there is need for investment in modern shopping malls, industrial parks, innovation hubs, adequately stocked laboratories, and state-of-the-art lecture theaters. We also believe, Your Excellency, that our institutions offer excellent opportunities which should be harnessed by astute entrepreneurs and investors for a win-win situation. Lastly, Your Excellency, let me pay special gratitude to your person and to your office for openly expressing your desire to directly engage us, the student community. This has brought forth this particular conference. However, we also feel, Your Excellency, that there is also need for you to interact with the larger populace of the students in the near future. We would want to offer an alternative date if your schedule allows, Your Excellency. And the date is the 30th of March. I thank you, Your Excellency. Tatenda Siyabonga Kakhulu.
Thank you very much, Kambisa, for articulating the requirements for the students. I think this was done very well indeed, and we were all listening very carefully. Well, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to just take a brief break for all of us by listening to a musical presentation by Faith Musical Group. Just 3 minutes, I think, will be okay. Thank you very much. It is now my singular honor to invite the chairperson of the ruling party, Comrade Opam Chinguri Kashiri, to do us the honor of introducing our guest of honor.
Ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed, I feel greatly honored and indeed humbled to be introducing a man, a politician par excellence, who throughout his entire life has invested in the liberation of this country. Born from a political family which was forced during the very early days to relocate to Zambia due to their very strong resistance against the oppressive system of Ian Smith. He joined UNIP at a tender age in 1961, occupying the position of Secretary for the Youth League in Lusaka. In 1962, he was recruited into ZAPU by Mr. Willie Musarurwa, subsequently moving to Tanganyika, now Tanzania, Mbeya, where with James Shkerema, Clement Muchachi, and Dana, opened the first ZAPU camp. In 1963, he received his first military training in Egypt, subsequently China, where he received infantry and engineering training at Nanjing Training School. In 1964, he attended the ZANU-Gweru Congress, which saw the likes of Ndabanini Stole being elected as president of ZANU, Leopold Takawira as vice president of ZANU, Herbert Chitepo as national chairman, Comrade R.G. Mugabe as secretary general. And due to his thorough military training, he and other colleague terrorists then were given a deadly assignment to blow up a locomotive train in Fort Victoria, now Mashingo. Comrade E.D. Mnangagwa was captured by Inspector Beans Bradshaw and Smith at Michael Mawema's house in 1965. He was tortured and lost hearing in one ear. He escaped death sentence due to underage, and this has greatly influenced him never to support the death sentence. Detained at Harare prison, he was for 1 year, Grace prison and Kami prison, and spent 6 years and 8 months with comrades R.G. Mugabe, Enos Nkala, Maurice Nyagumbo, Eddie Katekere, and Didmas Mutasa, before he was released and deported to Zambia in 1973 via Victoria Falls, and was received by Comrade Peter Baya in 1973. Sadly, some of his colleague terrorists, Master Treasure, was sentenced to life imprisonment. Yamini and Mulambo were the first to be executed. While in Zambia, he completed his law degree at the University of Zambia and continued working for the party in Zambia. In 1977, he was recalled to Mozambique and elected as special assistant to the president and member of the National Executive of ZANU at the Chimoyo Congress. In that capacity, he was head of both military and civil intelligence, deputized by the late General Musungwa Gawa Zinawashe. He was a member of the High Command and a member of the Central Committee. In 1980, he led the first group of comrades Didmas Mutasa, Edson Jobo, and late General Rex Mujuru Nongo from Maputo to Harare during the ceasefire. After elections in 1980, was appointed Minister of National Security and headed the Joint High Command during the integration of ZNA. After the Unity Accord in 1987, he became Minister of Justice and Legal and Parliamentary Affairs, as well as leader of the House in 1988, a portfolio he held up to 2000. He acted also as Minister of Finance in 1995 to 1996. Acting Minister of Foreign Affairs for a short period, he was Speaker of Parliament from 2000 to 2005, also Minister of Rural Housing and Social Amenities from 2005 to 2009. He became Minister of Defense from 2009 to 2013, when he was appointed Minister of Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs after elections until 2014. He was appointed Vice President of the Republic of Zimbabwe in 2014 and also responsible for administration of the Ministry of Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs. As Vice President, he was responsible for the supervision of economic ministries. On 19th of December 2017, ZANU-PF Central Committee nominated him President and First Secretary of ZANU-PF after recalling of the then President and First Secretary R.G. Mugabe. Nominated President of the Republic of Zimbabwe and inaugurated on the 24th November 2017. He has set economic recovery as the first priority of his administration. And I can assure you, we are running, if not flying, to achieve the 100 Quick Win program. Those who are saying he has not achieved much, you are going to have a shock of your life. Ladies and gentlemen, let me at this juncture invite His Excellency, Comrade E.D. Mnangagwa, to address us. Your Excellency, sir.
Pray be seated. Our Director of Ceremonies, Professor Ngwabi Bebe. The Minister of Higher and Tertiary Education, Science and Technology Development, Honorable Professor Amon Murira. The Minister of State for Harare Metropolitan Province, Honorable Miriam Chikukwa. The Chairman of the ruling party, Honorable Opam Chunguri Kashiri, and also Minister of Water and Climate. Senior government officials, heads of diplomatic missions, Acting Chief Officer of ZIMCHE, Dr. Chikuya, the Chairman of Zimbabwe University's Vice Chancellors Association, Professor Edimwenje, and other Vice Chancellors who are present, captains of industries, and representatives of the business community who are present, students from higher and tertiary institutions, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, comrades and friends. It is my singular honor and privilege to once again address members from the academia, potential investors, student fraternity, and other stakeholders at this important higher and tertiary education infrastructure investment conference for the first time. This conference comes only a few hours after I addressed captains of industry and commerce, who are the main beneficiaries of the human capital produced by higher learning institutions in our country. I welcome you all to this promising event where we seek to dialogue on ways to improve infrastructure at our education institutions across the country. In our quest to produce adequately skilled, well-rounded education products with the appropriate self-esteem, dignity, personal and national pride, we need to collectively prioritize infrastructure development to meet the needs of the present and future college students. For we are indeed products of our own environments. Thus, the Infrastructure Investment Conference and the Human Development Nexus is not only critical for economic development and growth, industrialization development of our nation, but equally ensures that we produce well-rounded college graduates for the broader global markets. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, our thrust should be to build state-of-the-art lecture theaters, lecture rooms, well-equipped laboratories, and resourced libraries, decent accommodation, cafeterias, along with modern sporting and recreational facilities. In addition, investment in infrastructure, which facilitates universities to become centers of technological incubation and innovations, research and development, should be encouraged. This will help to train and groom a highly qualified and skilled workforce, able to invent and produce proudly Zimbabwe products which are competitive in regional and global markets. My government is committed to sustain national economic development and achieving quality, inclusive, and equitable education as stated in the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 4, which has 10 targets encompassing many different aspects of education. To achieve comprehensive success in this sector, my government welcomes investment in higher and tertiary education. I'm so